Hello, everybody.
Okay, yeah, we are back online now. Tonight is kind of for me, but it's fine. I really don't know why. Okay, it should be smooth from now. So, the first thing you just have to do is try to set up your Git. Okay, and once you open your Git on your left pane like this, just try and create a repository. So you can create different repository for different projects. So I have a couple of projects here that I've worked on in the past. So that's I just have a couple.
You are not sharing your screen, though. So you're not sharing your screen.
Thank you. So now this is my Git now. So now the first thing you just want to do is for the class you have to create a repo. You can create as many repos as you want, repositories that you want, for different projects. Okay, so I have a couple of repositories that I've worked on in the past 2 years that I just kept in my repository. So let's just walk around that. Let's try and create a new repository now. Okay, so on your left pane you just create new, and what's the repository name? Let's just call it DevOps class. DevOps class. Okay, so this is the repository name called DevOps class. This is for training purpose. Okay, so now while you are setting it, you can either choose if you want to make it public or private. So when you make it public, anybody can view it by just searching. Okay, and if it's private, maybe you and those people you give access, they are the ones that can view it. So but since this is for training, let's just make it public. Then we also have Readme. So you have your Readme file. This is where you can write long description for your project. Okay, so that's Readme. But now I actually want to show us something, so I'll not add the Readme there. Okay, so add .ignore. So this .ignore is choose which file not to track. So if you want to have a .ignore, so you can create a .ignore. It's a file that you actually use for keeping some files. There are some files that you don't want it to be pushed to your repository. They should be private to you. So you just add those the file paths to your Git Ignore. Okay, so so you can choose which license the GNU here. That's for your open source. So you can just leave that none. Then create a repository. So create a repository. Let's click on create repository. So now I'll show you this. So now these are some of the things you could do. So you to set up using this is to set up in desktop, HTTPS or SSH. So we have different ways now to work with this, or let me say to start working with this. Okay, but all this we are going to be doing in class. So now when you look at this, it's trying to give you some tutorials on how you can manage it. So now there are different lines here. This is the first line, echo. What this echo is actually doing is just trying to create a readme file. It's another way for creating file. The last time we treated how to use VI and how to use touch. Okay, you can also use echo. So what echo actually does is, let me show you echo in action. So echo is just for printing something on your wow. I think I have to work on this. Start session. So the echo command is for printing on your terminal. Okay, so let's run echo. So this is the echo command now. Echo command I am Simi. So it's just going to print this. It's going to print I am Simi on the terminal. Okay, so now we now have this redirection. They call it, I think they call it redirection anyway. So now this is for writing to a file. So you are telling it, instead of printing this on my terminal, please write it inside a file called readme.md. Okay, so now let's do it now and see. So ls, what do we have here? pwd, okay, cd home, okay, vi hard simi. Okay, so we have simi. Okay, so now let's run the command and see what we have. So we should see a file called, oh, I didn't see it into simi. Cd into simi. Okay, so now we should see a file called, let me run the command now. You know, remember it's a new directory, right? ls, it's empty, right? So now let's run the command. So do ls now. We should see the readme.md now. So let's cut the file readme.md. You should see the content DevOps class. Cut. You remember your cut is for viewing a file without really opening it. Readme.md. So you can see DevOps class. Okay. So that's the command now. Then the next thing is git init. Okay, so git init is for initializing a repository. Anyway, I'm going to explain this in details. So git add, git commits, you know, you understand all this as done in the class. Okay, so now that we've created the repository, the name of the repository is called DevOps class, and the URL to the repository is github.com/bulexy/DevOps class. Okay, so once we have that, let's go ahead to our EC2 instance. So the next thing we want to do now is we want to install Git, the tool called Git, right? So what you should do is apt, I think apt-get install Git. So it's as simple as that. You run your apt-get install Git and it's going to install Git. Git is already the newest version. Okay, I think Git is already installed on this instance. I think it comes with it by default. So now, once we have this, now we have simi. So now, the first thing we should do now is what do I have here? After you install your Git, next thing you should try and do is try to configure the Git on your terminal. Well, when I mean configure, you run a config so that everything you do is going to carry your name and your email. So it's as simple as just running git that's git config. Just run this command anyway. It's not a must. Okay, but in fact, okay, let's not run this. I think at some point, by the time we want to push, it's going to tell us to do this. So let's just continue. So now, once we have this, now there are two ways for initializing a Git after you've created it. Okay. The first way is you can initialize a Git by yourself, or another way is you can just copy this Git from the remote repository onto your local repository. So now this is how it works. For you to just get all the contents of this remote repository on your local repository, okay, what you can just do is git clone. This is the command for getting a copy. And mind you, before we start, let me try and run ls and see what we have. You see, we only have readme, right? Now I'm going to copy what we have in this remote repository onto my local repository now, onto my local server, to make it my Git local repository. So now to do that, it's going to be git clone, then the URL to the repository. I'm used to my Mac. Okay, so git clone, paste. Okay, warning, you have to you appear to have cloned an empty repository. Why? Because you have nothing inside the repository. So now let's run the ls. You should see the DevOps class here. Okay, you see this, right? So then we can cd to DevOps now. Then let's see, empty, and then there are some files that Git actually works by configuring some files, some hidden files, which actually carry the state of your directory. Okay, so let's just run ls. Let's run ls-lat to see what we have. So this is the file we are talking. So inside this file, that's where Git actually keeps all the configurations. Okay, so far what we've actually done, please don't get scared. Maybe I didn't really start well. Now let me just recap what I've done so far. What we did was, the first thing we did was we created a file, we created a remote repository called DevOps class. Okay, and then we cloned. That's all we've done. Okay, we created a remote repository called DevOps class, and then we installed Git on our EC2 instance. But in our case, Git actually comes with the package with the OS we installed, so we don't have to install it. But there are some scenarios you have to install Git yourself. So you install your Git and then you clone this remote repository. This is the URL to the remote repository. So you just run git clone, then the URL to the remote repository. Okay, so that's what we've done so far. I hope I'm clear.
Yes, it's clear. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
All yes, right. Sir. Right on. Right on.
All right. Thank you. So now that we've done this, let's just try. Let's now start playing around with Git. All we've done so far is we've actually initialized a repository. So let's say we now have some code now, or we just have some things that we've created. So let's create a file inside this repository. Okay, so let's create a file inside this repository. Creating a file inside this repository, let's just say vi test.txt. Okay. This is a test file. Okay, so WQ. So now we have this. Before we go on, I think I actually have this simple illustration that I plan to share with the class. It should help us understand some things. So now we have Git actually works in 3 modes. Okay, so the first mode is called the modified 3 states rather. The first state is called the modified state. Okay, the second state is actually called the staging state. Okay, and then the third state is actually called the commit state. I'm going to explain the 3. So now, once you create a file, this is the file I've created. All I've just done is I just created the file. Git is unaware, does not know anything about the file. Okay, so now how do I make Git be aware of my file, of what I've just created? Okay, so how do I make Git to be aware of it? The first thing I just have to do is, like, let's say for instance now I want to add this Git. I want to add this file to my Git. Okay, so for me to do that, the first thing I just have to do is just run my git add. By the time you run your git add and the file name, or before I do that, let me show you something. Run this command so that you can better understand. Git status. You know, I only created this file, right? Run git status. Git says it can't find anything. Okay, it said one untracked file called test.txt. On track, you see this, right? Now, for me to make Git to be able to be tracking the file, how do I make Git track the file? It's as simple as me just writing git add the file name test.txt. Okay, so now let's run git status again and see. So you see the state has changed now. Changes to be committed. And remember, I told you Git is actually running in 3 states. The commit state, Git is running in 3 states. The modified. Modified is the untracked state, and then the staging. Okay, so now without running the git add, it's only in the modified state. Git does not recognize anything at this stage. So by the time you run your git add, just like we ran our git add there, so we have this. We have Git is now tracking it, changes to be committed. Okay, so now to now make all what Git is actually doing is it took note of a file called text.txt. Okay, to now make it available in Git repository. Okay, remember I told you something. I said there are 2 ways. There are 2 types of source code management system. We have the centralized and the distributed, right? So in the centralized, by the time you just run your Git commit, that's all. Okay, so now for us to actually commit it to Git so that we can store it in our local repository. How do we store it in our local repository? All we have to do is git commit. Okay, so what we've done, what we did at first by running the git add was just to add it to the Git repository. Now, how can we now make it? How can we commit it so that Git can store the files? How do you do that? It's as simple as just running git commit. Okay, then verify. I kind of feel I've folded things up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one question.
Yes, please.
In this place where we created test.txt, whenever I want to create files like that, how should I ask this question? Okay, you did vi test.txt, right?
Yes.
And I believe that automatically created the file. Is there any other way we can create a file without editing it, without using vi?
This is your first class, right? You just joined.
I think that's touch. Yes, that's using touch.
Yeah, please. You may have to refer to all the videos we've done in the past. We spoke about all those extensively in the past. Okay. All right. Thank you. So, do you have any other question? What do you say? Do you have any other question, please?
I have one more question.
When we started this Git, maybe this is going to clear a lot of things. When we started, what we did in our case was, we actually cloned. We ran git clone and then the URL, right? That's what we did. Come here now. What we did was we cloned it. Okay, we cloned it. But now there are other ways we can do this thing without cloning, and I believe that is what you are doing in your case. You didn't really clone. You didn't clone. You didn't run git clone then the repository URL. You didn't do that. That's why you are getting it.
I think I cloned. It showed me you appear to have cloned an empty repository.
Then you have to cd into that repository because it's going to appear as a folder. Then you cd into that folder.
Into that folder. Okay. All right, sir. Doing that right now.
You said you are just jumping from one to another. I don't know if you can just quickly give a kind of summary,
Okay.
Step by step how we arrived here. I was following, and I believe everybody was following too. But just to, just like the way we've been doing it in the previous classes, it's always one step, then the next one that leads to the next one. So this one is a kind of coming as a blockchain. So can we just make it progressive? Just quickly run a kind of. I'm sure you understand me.
I really appreciate that, which is what I want to hear. I don't want to be talking to myself. So please, let's start this afresh. Okay, so we are going to start this afresh again. Okay, so Now we created the repository before, which is called DevOps class. So you see it's appearing here. Okay. Now I actually want to create another. I actually want to create another repository. I'm going to call it DevOps class 2. Okay. So the first thing you want to do when you want to start is go to your GitHub. Go to github.com and click on new. Click on new at the left pane like this. So click on new. Okay, so here it's asking for the repository name. I'm going to call it DevOps class 2. Okay, and description, this is for DevOps class. Okay, so let me leave it as public anyway, because I'm going to delete later. So now the first one I did, remember I said it should not add readme. Okay, this one I'm going to make it to add readme. Okay, readme is just a file that describes the project. Okay, that's readme. So I'm saying it's going to automatically add the readme file for me. Then git ignore. This is asking me like, does it want do I want it to create a git ignore file for me? What is git ignore? Git ignore is just a file that states all the files that you want Git to ignore. Like, okay, please Git, I don't want you to have access to this file. I have nothing to do with this file. They are my own private file. Okay, so it's a file, an hidden file, which is called .git ignore. So inside that file, you just keep all the files that it's to, so that you don't mistakenly push your private key or your password, your username, your configuration file, to Git. And once you push it, it takes the grace of God. Even after deleting itself, Git has already. So it can be anything. It can be anything. You can even use it to during COVID. I think I heard about that during COVID. Like there was restriction in China. In China you couldn't really send a lot of things out and all. So what people were doing is they were actually using GitHub. Like I think I read about it. So they will just upload the file in GitHub and all, and they share it. I had that then. I think I was sharing about it. So you can use anything. You can use it to save anything, even your website. Yeah, I've once hosted my website on GitHub, so it can be anything. Okay, but in my own case, I'm using source code because that's what you are going to be managing as a DevOps. You are going to be working with codes. Okay, so forget about source code. Just see when I use source code, because I'm used to source code. So maybe when I unconsciously use source code, just take it as any file, any document. Okay. So we have our git ignore. Then once you have all those, just click on create repository. So you see now, you see what is actually showing. You see automatically it actually shows a file here which is called readme.md, because I told it to add a readme.md when I was creating the repository. The one we created earlier, that's why it's showing all this information, because it has no readme. Okay, so now let's continue. Inside this readme now, you can even open the readme file as well. Just click on it. It's going to automatically open its contents. So this is the content of the readme file. You can easily edit it. Just click on the edit button here and change anything. Okay, so now after that, just click on commit and take note. You see, so that is what readme is actually doing. The moment anybody click on that repository, the thing that they are going to see, that's a detailed description of the project. That's what is going to display. Let me open one of my projects anyway and see. You should be able to see. Okay, I think I have this. Let me see. just scroll down. So you see the description of the project. You don't have to open it. That's what Readme is all about. So what you're seeing on clicking of the file is what is inside this Readme file. Okay. So now we have these two projects. One is DevOps class and the other one is DevOps class 2. Okay. So let's go back. Let's go back. So now there are two ways of starting a repository. Let's say you want to work on a repository. There are two ways of let me just restart this. I've not really tried it. Let me just restart this and see. It's timing out. I actually shared a tutorial earlier how you can stop this timing out. I'll try and do that too. So now sudo cd what's this? Okay, so we are inside CME. Okay, pwd. All right. So now let's see what we have inside the CME directory. We have this DevOps class. I'm going to remove this DevOps class. Let me remove this DevOps class, rf. So we can start afresh. Okay, so we have okay, let me remove the readme too, so do not confuse a lot of people. Okay, so we have a clean directory now. So now there are two ways of working with this thing. Okay, so the first way we tried was, let's get a copy of this repository. Okay, now since this one is having a readme now, to get a copy of this, just copy this URL, okay, on our local repository. So we want to have a copy of this repository as our own local repository, which is on EC2 instance. It can also be on your Windows. I can also show you the same thing on Windows, but let's just go with EC2 instance. So to do that, you just do git clone. That's the simple command, git clone. Oh God, I'm used to Mac, so just right click. Run your git clone, then right and enter. So now this is a success message now. Receiving objects received. So run your ls, let's see. So you see, you can say DevOps class 2. So let's see the content of DevOps class 2. You should see this readme. Okay, you see that, right? Let me enter DevOps class 2 and see DevOps class 2, enter. Let's cut the content of the readme so you can see that there's no abracadabra.
Sorry, Bolo.
Yeah.
Hello. Sorry, Bolo. When I tried to do the git clone and then the URL, it's asking for username for https.github.com.
Okay. Yeah. Have you registered on GitHub?
Yes, I have.
Then put your username, your GitHub username and password. That's what it's asking for. Sorry, I omitted that anyway. So just supply it with your GitHub username and password. The username you use in registering on the GitHub. Okay. Thank you for talking about that. So
okay, thank you.
Yeah, some of you might experience the same thing. So it's going to ask you for username. So try and supply the username and password. I think I've configured this in the past, so that's why it's not really asking for that. So let's continue. So now you can see the content. This is the editing readme file, which is what we added here. So that is one way. Okay. Now the second way I can also work on this is, let me step out of this. Now this is our repository now. this directory I am. This is a local repository, which is another instance of this remote repository which we have inside GitHub. Okay, so how do you know? How do you know repository? Just say ls-lat. Once you see a .git, this is actually means this is what actually makes it a repository, because all the configuration file for the Git is already is written inside this file. Okay, so you can easily see what is inside. Just run your Git status, and it said nothing to commit. Your branch is up to date. Everything is fine. That is up to date with this. Okay. Now, to know which origin, to know which origin, which remote repository this Git is connected to, it's as simple as just running Git. Is it Git remote? Yeah, I think Git remote. Yeah, when you run Git remote -v is going to show the URL of the repository this is connected to. Okay, so I can have, okay, sorry, this is one, right? Let's say I'm connected to another. Let me say I even have another instance, and let me say I have another Git platform, GitLab. Let me say I have a repository on GitLab. I can just say gitlab.com. I have some code on GitLab too. I can clone it, and you see. So on the same instance, I can have multiple repository. Okay. Oops. Do I remember my password?
Sorry, sir.
Okay, I'm mixing.
Yeah, I actually did not follow this your second way, which you already created the Readme file. So here I'm trying to add my empty repository.
No, hold on. Please hold on. It's not a second way. It's still the same method. All I've done so far was I just run my Git clone.
Okay.
So it's as simple as let me look for something. I have this Edge system here. Just click on the Edge system. I have different repositories here. Okay, so this is Edge system. It's as simple as I'll just run my Git clone. Let me step out of this. cd. Okay, sorry. The reason why that your own was asking, you asked the question earlier why it was asking for username and password. I think it was because it was a private repository. That's why it's asking for username and password. It's just trying to check if you have an access.
Yeah,
so mine did not ask. Sorry, mine didn't ask because it was a public repository. Okay, so it's clone.
So when I imputed the username and password too, I'm still having authentication field for HTTPS and then the URL. And then there's this support for password authentication was removed on 13th August 2021. Please see HTTPS docs.github and all that.
Yeah.
Sir, please, before you log in, let's log in again.